Today we're going to be looking at the chart of when Israel attacked Iran in order to get an idea of who may be the winner of the outcome of this war. So we cast the chart for the exact moment that happened, which was at 3 a.m. local time, attacking Iran on the 13th of June last week. So that was the time I could find where the launch, it said a couple minutes after 3 o'clock, but I'm using 3 o'clock a.m. as the time when the official beginning of the launch was happening. So the missiles were hitting a little bit after 3, so the missiles being launched at 3. And so we're going to be using a system of rules that comes from a book from around the 1500s called Tajika Nilakunti. And Tajika, this is a system of astrology that comes from Persia originally. And it was preserved in India, this specific type of astrology. So when a client comes and asks a specific question to an astrologer, that astrologer then makes a chart for that exact moment of the question being asked, reads that chart according to various sets of rules depending on what the question is about. So one of the questions that in this book that has been preserved is, what would be the outcome of a war? And there are very specific and unusual rules, and this translation comes from Ernst Wilhelm, who combined various translations that had contradictory statements, and he created his unique translation, which I'm going to be going from. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to go through 1 through 15 on this, and we're going to tally up. Say one side has an advantage here, one side has an advantage here, and we're going to tally up and see who has the overall advantage. And at the end, I'm going to come to a general overview of what I believe will be the outcome. And so we're going to go through specifically all of these different possibilities. And if you want to just skip ahead in this video, I'll leave the timestamps below to see the general interpretations of this chart and the general predictions. So if you want to skip ahead, you can, but as we go through, we're going to be getting into these intricate rules and studying what could be happening with each side. And so let's get started. And as we go, I'm going to have to give some background because the concepts that are used can be strange and unusual if you're not used to Vedic astrology. But I'll try to make it as general as possible and easy to understand as possible. So number one, a graha in the lagna. So a graha is a planet in the ascendant or the lagna. So we have that. This ascendant is Taurus. There's a planet in the lagna. Okay, or with the Lagna Lord, which is Venus, the Lord of Taurus. In Isharafa with the moon indicates the Quiris king wins the war. So as we start, the attacking party, the people who attack, is represented by the Quiris. They initiated the conflict. So that's going to be Venus. Venus is the Lord of Israel in this sense. And the opposing side is the 7th, who are the defenders, which would be Iran. And that's the Iranian position. The lord of that is Mars. So you could see these are the two beginning planets, Mars being the forces of Iran and Venus being the forces of Israel. So Isharafa means when it's a type of aspect, it's a type of yoga, forgive me. So the moon is over here. And the first thing to understand with this system of astrology is that we have to know the speeds of the planets and their orbs of influence, and what planets are the fastest. The moon is the fastest planet. It moves by degrees in the fastest. The second is Mercury, the third is Venus, the Sun, then Mars, then Jupiter, then Saturn. Those are the fastest to the slowest planet. Isharafa yoga is when you see these degrees here. Isharafa is a separation yoga. So moon has more degrees than Venus, and they're 5 signs away. So that means that the moon is separating. It used to be around 6 degrees, then it's now towards 11, and it's moving away from a pure aspect to a trine aspect to Venus. So it's separating from Venus. And that's an Isharafa yoga. So in this first rule here, we see that a planet in the lagna, yep, we have that, and the Lagna Lord, Venus, in Isharafa with the moon indicates the Quiris king wins the war. So that first rule shows that Israel is going to win the war. And as we go through, we're going to one side, it's not just the be all and end all, but that's a very strong indication. And Venus being in its own house is a very strong position for Venus, for the Lagna Lord. So this is showing that Israel has a strong position. Their position is very well fortified. Venus is in a great position here, and it's got that separating yoga. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight this in blue for Israel. Israel wins that point. Okay, so let's go to the second. A planet or a graha is a planet in the seventh. There is no planet in the seventh, or with the seventh lord in Ithisala with the moon, indicates the opposing king wins the war. So the seventh lord in Ithisala, that's a connecting yoga. Is Mars connecting with the moon? In other words, since the moon is faster than Mars, is the moon going to catch up in degrees to Mars? It will catch up. It's at 11, but it's not within orb. The moon's orb is 12 degrees. Another 12 degrees would make it 23 degrees, which would be in the moon's orb to that yoga initiating. But it's farther than 12 degrees, so that yoga hasn't been initiating. Also, it's in the sixth sign. Their relationship is not a sextile relationship, square relationship, trine relationship, or opposition relationship. So actually, even if, say, Mars was in even 15 degrees, the moon wouldn't be creating a yoga here because it's 8 signs from the moon, and that doesn't give an aspect. That doesn't give a strong aspect. So in short, this number 2 is not happening. So that means that Iran does not get a point there, you could say. So now move to the third, and this is where some of the rules get complicated. And I already put my notes here, so we can just jump to that in a second. But it says Saturn, Mars, Jupiter fast, joined with strength and ahead. Mercury, Venus, Moon without strength and behind indicate victory to the queerest. So there's two sets of 3 that represent the forces, the strength of the army and the strength of the ability to win the battle. For Israel, the initiator, those forces are represented by Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter. Iran's forces are represented by Mercury, Venus, and the Moon, the opposing side. So when a planet is fast, is the first condition. So we're going to judge each of these planets and to see how strong they are, and then we're going to determine who has the upper hand in terms of military forces. So fast. Fast means at the time of the Prashna being collected, was the planet moving faster than its average speed? So planets change speeds as they are moving through the zodiac, but they have an average speed. Up here you see the average speeds. So let's see if we go to the speeds of the planets at this time. This is the Sun, and then this is Saturn. Let's see. If we go here, I've already written it down. Saturn that day was fast, the first force, because it's at 2 degrees 57 minutes per day. And its average speed is 2 degrees 1 minute per day. So it's fast. We can just jump through 146% that day. So Saturn was fast. Jupiter was fast. Mars was also fast. So all of Israel's planets representing its forces are fast. And then we have the other planets, the Mercury, Venus. Excuse me, it's hard to see because the actual planet is over here. But I'm just going to jump ahead and just tell you that all the planets that day were running fast, were moving fast, except for the moon. But let's go through and see one by one if Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter, the forces of Israel, are fast, strong in dignity, and ahead. And ahead means, starting from Aries, are they ahead of the other planets? So if a planet's in Aries, that means it's behind all the other planets because the other planets are in front of it in the zodiac. So as we go through, we'll see Saturn. Saturn is fast, and that gives it a point. Saturn's debilitated, which is going to come into play a little later when I get through the predictions. Saturn's debilitated. That gives it minus a point. It's behind all of the other forces. The other forces would be Mercury, Venus, and the Moon, because Venus, Mercury, and the Moon are all ahead in the zodiac. So Saturn is behind in 3. So it has 1 point working for it, which is being fast, and it has 4 points working against it, being debilitated and behind the other planets. So Saturn ends up, as you can see here, at -3 in terms of its overall strength as part of the Israeli force. Jupiter is fast. It's exalted here in the 3rd house, but it's combust with the sun. It's too close to the sun, and therefore it is combust, as you can see here. It is within 15 degrees of the sun, and that's going to work against Jupiter also, as we're going to discover later. So that actually gives it -1 point. And Jupiter is behind Mercury, and it's behind the moon, but it's ahead of Venus. So that means it's behind 2, so it loses 2, and it's ahead of 1. So that gives it +3 points for being fast, exalted, and ahead 1, but -3 points for being combust and behind 2, which leaves it at 0. So it's breaking even. It's not a very strong force. We do that same calculation with Mars. Mars is fast that day, gives it a point. It's in a great friend sign. It's friend the sun, and in combined strength, it's in a great friend sign, so it's in good dignity, giving it a +1. It's behind 1 planet. It's behind the moon, but it's in front of Mercury and Venus. So that gives it -1 for being behind 1 and +2 for being ahead. So that gives us +4 points, but -1 for being behind 1, at a grand total of +3. So Israel's forces have a total, it's breaking even if you combine all of them. So Saturn's bringing it behind 3. Jupiter is breaking even, so it doesn't gain or lose any points. And then Mars brings it back up 3. So its grand total is 0. So its forces are breaking even. If we do Iran, Mercury, it was fast that day, gives it a point. It's in a great enemy sign, which makes it lose a point, so it's not in good dignity, but it's with an exalted planet, Jupiter, which I give it a point, which may or may, we'll talk about that in a minute, if we want to include being conjunct an exalted planet. But we'll give it a point for now. But it's behind, Mercury is behind Mars 1 of the other side, but it's ahead of Jupiter and Saturn, which gives it +2. So the grand total, it's gaining 4 points, it's losing 2 points, and so it comes up at a positive gain of 2. But if we don't include that with exalted Jupiter, it comes at +1, so it's still coming out ahead. With Venus, the second planet in the forces of Iran, it's fast that day, gives it a point. It's in its own house, good dignity, gives it another point. It's behind 2 planets, it's behind Jupiter and Mars, which makes it lose 2, and it's ahead of Saturn, which makes it gain 1, which gives it a grand total of gaining 3 -2, so it's up ahead 1. With the moon was slow that day. It's in a friend sign, which gives it 1 point, but its lord is debilitated, Saturn's debilitated, which can make it lose a point, and we'll tally that up here if we want to include that or not, because its dignity is okay, but its lord is not in good dignity, so it's basically making a judgment call. It brings the planet behind. And moon is ahead of all 3 of the other forces, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, starting from Aries. So it's in Capricorn. It's the farthest ahead in terms of the zodiac. So that leaves it with +2. It gained 2 points for being in a friend sign. It gained 1 point for being a friend sign. It's ahead, which gains 3 points, ahead of 3 planets, which gains a +4, but -1 for being debilitated, -1 for being a slow. It loses 2, and the Lord being debilitated. So in either way, if we count the Lord being debilitated or not, it's either coming up +2 if we don't count the Lord being debilitated, but it's up 3. Hold on, let me check. -1, -2, -1, or -1, +2. So if we count the Lord being debilitated, it's +2. If we don't count the Lord being debilitated, it's +3. So it's up either way, which gives it a grand, if we combine all of these forces, they're at +5, even if we don't count the exalted Jupiter or the debilitated Saturn going into judging the dignity. So basically what this is saying is that the Israeli and Iran forces, when we combine what their actual military strength is and where they are, Israel is barely breaking even, but Iran is +5 when we combine and we tally all that up. And it's a process. Astrology is, there's a lot of detail that goes into it. So that's saying that really Iran is way farther ahead in terms of its military might, according to this Prashna. So what we're going to do, Iran wins out on that point. So here we're going to give green to Iran. So now we're even. It's 1-1. So let's go on to the 4th rule. The fourth rule, the Lagna, the ascendant, and the seventh Lord and the Lagna Lord, in the 3rd, 6th, 10th, or 11th in Ithisala indicates there will be peace between the two. The Lagna Lord is not in the 3rd, 6th, 10th, or 11th, and Mars, the 7th Lord, is in the 4th. It's not in any of that. So this rule is not applying. So we can skip that and move ahead. Okay, so this 5th rule, this is where it gets even a little bit more confusing. So the Lagna or the 7th Lord between the two divisions indicates the fall of the other. So we have those divisions, Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter, as the forces of Israel. Then we have Mercury, Venus, Moon as the forces of Iran. But Mars is the 7th Lord, meaning that it's the overall Lord of Iran, even though it was a part of the forces in the previous rule. So what we're trying to see here is what planets is Mars surrounded by? What are the closest planets to it? And are those planets, what side of the conflict are the planets that are hemming it in on? Well, Mars, being Iran, is surrounded by Mercury and Moon. Those are the two, in ignoring Ketu, those are the two planets that are surrounding it. And those are two friendly forces to Iran. Those are the divisions. So that shows that Iran has support around it. It has support coming to it. And it's not being pressured in a way that if those were two enemy planets around it, closest to it. So there's not as much pressure being put onto Iran in this sense. The other is Venus, the planet of Israel. Israel is closest to Saturn and is closest to the Sun, but the Sun is not a part of the divisions, the two teams. So it's closest to its forces here, Saturn, and it's closest to Jupiter, one of the planets of the divisions. Those are the forces for Israel. So these planets are even closer than what the Moon is. So actually, Venus is in a good position, being around, not having pressure being put upon it in a way that would be threatening, in a sense. So that is overall positive for both sides. Neither side is being pressured by another side. In the sense of this Prashna, not in the sense of the war actually happening on the ground. So what that means is that the 5th goes even. Both sides are not being hemmed in by hostile planets, and so that rule is not going to apply for this either. So in the 6th rule, the ruler amongst the two divisions, and in Isharafa with the 7th Lord indicates intense and long fighting. Well, the ruler of the two divisions. So that would mean the divisions, not the 7th Lord and not the 7th Lord and not the Lagna Lord. So the ruler of the two divisions would be the strongest of the two divisions. That would be, for Israel, would be Mars. For Iran, the strongest would be the Moon. The Moon can't be in Isharafa or separating yoga with itself or with the 7th Lord. It's not in Isharafa with the 7th Lord, Mars, as we talked about earlier. And Mars is not in Isharafa yoga with itself, which is the 7th Lord. So basically this rule doesn't apply either, which would indicate intense and long fighting. And if we want to take that as Mars being essentially, even if we chose Venus as being representing Israel as the leader of the two divisions, the ruler of the two divisions, Venus is not in Isharafa yoga with Mars. It's actually going towards Mars. So actually what this rule says is that long and intense fighting, we might not have long and intense fighting with this conflict, relatively speaking, because this yoga is not applying here. At least we're not being indicated long and intense fighting. But no one comes out on top. That is kind of a neutral rule, but that rule is not indicating long and intense fighting. So going to the 7th rule, the Lagna Lord, Venus, at Saturn or with Saturn, so that's not happening, in Kambala, indicates victory to the queerest. So we don't even have to go further because they're not at Saturn or a slow planet. Venus is not with a slow planet in Kambala yoga, which is another yoga, but we can just ignore that rule. It's not happening. If that is combust, if Venus is combust, which it is not, or in the debilitation place of the 7th Lord, debilitation place of the 7th Lord, Mars is Cancer, it's not. So none of this is applying yet. Or if the 7th Lord is in an angle. 7th Lord is in an angle. It's in the 4th. So if the 7th Lord is an angle, so we have something, especially the 7th. Well, it's not in the 7th, but it's in the 4th, still an angle. indicates the querist is defeated. That means Israel will be defeated. So this third yoga here, or this third rule here, indicates a victory for Iran. So I'm going to give it green there. That's a point for Iran. Samya grahas, so now we're on to rule 8. Samya grahas behind the lagna and slow grahas in the front, indicating favorable assistance. Samya is gentle planets, which would be Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and not in this case the moon, because the moon is waning, so moon would not be in this. So Samya grahas behind the lagna and slow grahas in front, gaining favorable assistance. So let's judge this from both sides. Venus is behind, so what we want is to judge Israel's side. We want gentle planets behind the lagna, which would mean going this way. There is one gentle planet behind the lagna, because Venus is at 6 degrees and the lagna is at 20. So that means that's a point. Let's go, I did my notes here. Venus is behind the lagna, that gives it a point, but no other gentle planets leading up to the 7th. The 7th is the cutoff point. So it gets 1 point there. And slow planets in front of the lagna would give it more points. None of these planets are slow this day. Only the moon was slow this day. So Israel only gets 1 point according to this rule. Now let's go from the 7th, the position of Iran. Let's see if there are gentle planets behind the 7th, which would be going in this direction of the zodiac, and let's see if there's slow planets in front. Well, behind the 7th, so the 6th house here, are there any gentle planets? We have Mercury and Jupiter. Venus doesn't count because Venus is on the other side of the lagna, which the cutoff point would be 20 degrees here in Scorpio. But if it was in front of 20 degrees, that would count for Iran. But anyway, Iran gains 2 gentle planets behind it, so it gains +2. And slow planets in front of it. Moon is the only slow planet that day. So this rule gives Israel a total of 1 point and Iran 3 points. And that means that whoever gains this rule gains favorable assistance. So that means that Iran, they're both going to gain assistance, but Iran will gain more favorable assistance from outside parties. So Iran gets the upper hand for that point. Now let's move on to the 9th rule. The lagna lord at the 8th, the lagna lord is not at the 8th, or an ithasala with the 8th lord, indicates death to the querist. Ithasala, connecting yoga. Venus is already moved past Jupiter. Venus is faster than Jupiter. It's already moved past Jupiter's position. It's at 6 degrees, Jupiter's at 42 minutes. If Jupiter was at 7 degrees or 8 degrees or even 9, anywhere in the range of Venus's orb, which is 7 degrees, in front, say if Jupiter was at 10 degrees, Venus would be enclosing in on Jupiter, which would give it that yoga, which would make death to the querist. But since Venus is ahead, that doesn't count. So that question, we move beyond that. The 10th rule, the 7th Lord standing at the 2nd, 7th Lord Mars is not standing at the 2nd, or an ithasala in connecting yoga with the 2nd Lord indicates the destruction of the enemy. Is Mars an ithasala yoga with Gemini, with Gemini's ruler Mercury? It's not, because first of all, they're not in a sextile relationship. Mercury would have to be at least 2 signs away. And Mercury is enclosing on Mars, but the orb of influence is 7 degrees. Mars would have to be at around anything under basically 15 degrees for that yoga to happen. 14 degrees, 52 minutes, but it's not. So that yoga doesn't count. So this is no destruction of the enemy. Rule 11, the lagna lord in ithasala, the lagna lord Venus in connecting yoga with the 10th lord indicates victory to the querist. The 10th lord is Saturn. The 10th sign from the ascendant is Saturn. It's not in ithasala with Saturn. It's only 1 sign away, and again, Venus is already past Saturn. It just doesn't work. It's not applicable. So victory to the querist is not there. Moving on to the 12th. The 7th lord, Mars, in ithasala, in connecting yoga with the 4th lord indicates victory to the enemy. The fourth lord, the fourth sign from the ascendant, is the sun. The sun is here. The sun is at 22 degrees in a sextile relationship, enough signs away to create an aspect. The sun is faster than Mars, so the sun is going to catch up to Mars, and they're only within 5 degrees or so, a little bit more than 5 degrees. So this is an Ithisala yoga. So the seventh lord is an Ithisala with the fourth lord, and it's in the fourth lord's sign, or it's in the sign of the fourth. So this applies, and it means victory to the enemy. So that means that's another indication for Iran. And this is an important yoga that I'm going to talk about at the end, and we're going to time this out, when this yoga is likely to happen, and there's some rules for timing. So both divisions in angles, okay, so both divisions, the divisions being, when we go back to the teams, Saturn, Mars, Jupiter being divisions for Israel, Mercury, Venus, Moon being the divisions for Iran, both divisions in angles, and the first and seventh lords in Ithisala creates victory to the stronger. Well, none of that, they're not all in angles. The Lagna Lord and the seventh lord are in angles, but the other planets involving are not in angles. So that doesn't, meaning the first, fourth, seventh, or 10th houses. So that's not applying. In movable Rashis, with strength indicates initial strength followed by defeat. So with this rule, we come in with, basically a movable sign starts off strong, but then it tapers out and gets defeated. So in this case, we want planets in fixed Rashis to hold things together better. Well, Israel has one planet, Saturn, which is in a movable sign Aries, and it has Jupiter in a movable sign in Cancer. So those will start off strong, and even though Saturn was extremely weak, as we saw, debilitated in the 12th house, Jupiter is very strong, exalted, but combust. So there is Jupiter's mixed, but again, being in a movable sign, meaning it starts off strong, but doesn't carry through. So that doesn't really work. So those two planets are not going to be helping Israel, but Venus is in a fixed sign in its own house. So that's a plus point for Israel. It's not in a movable sign, and it has strength. So we can give Israel a +1. Or excuse me, not Venus here, Mars being, when we're talking about the other sides. Mars is a part of the Jupiter-Saturn team. Mars is in a fixed sign, so that works for Israel. And it's the same with Iran. The moon is in a movable sign, Capricorn, in a friend sign, so it has strength. So that means it'll start off well, but not be able to finish. And then Mercury also in a movable sign. Mercury is not in strength, and it's in a movable sign. So again, Mercury is not helping Iran in this respect. But Venus is in a movable sign in its own house. So at the end of this rule, it comes off even. Both teams have planets, the same amount of planets in movable signs and the same amount of planets in fixed signs. So it comes out even there. So neither side gets that point. So now point 14. The Lagna Lord in the 12th indicates heavy losses. The Lagna Lord is not in the 12th. The 7th Lord in the 6th indicates heavy losses to the enemy. Why the 6th? Because the 6th is 12 signs from the 7th. So that if Mars was here, if the 7th Lord was here, that would mean major losses for the enemy. But that yoga doesn't count, this rule doesn't count for either side. And so the final rule, before I get into the general observations and what we can look at, the 10th Lord in the Lagna, the 10th Lord, Saturn, is not in the Lagna, indicates aid to the querists, so that doesn't count. The 4th Lord in the 7th, the 4th Lord is the Sun, it's not in the 7th, indicates that aid comes to the enemy. So this rule doesn't count either, for either side. So when we count up who has more favorable points, point by point, Israel has 1, Iran has 1, 2, 3, 4. So this shows that Iran is going to win the war just by counting these points. So, but I'm going to go on to a couple more of my predictions of what I'm seeing as if you read the chart generally on what other kinds of things to look at, and get a little bit more specific about from what I've been observing in the news and in relation to this Prashna chart. So I have Israel is in an optimal diplomatic position. Why? Because it gains this first rule. It has itself in the Lagna Venus is strong in its own house in the Lagna, in Israel's position. So that's a really good starting point. It shows that Israel gets off to a really good start, and it's in a position of strength as it begins. Why am I saying it's an optimal diplomatic position? Because Venus is the diplomat. Venus is the planet of the ministers. So Venus is in a really good position to bring in assistance and to use the Venusian quality of bringing in help. So I am predicting that the United States will enter the war, the number one ally of Israel. And it is quite possible that diplomatic intervention via the United States or other nations, say the other allies of Israel, which would be most of the European nations, create major turning points which result in success. So some kind of success because of diplomatic intervention on Israel's behalf. So that's the strongest point for Israel in this entire Prashna. And just remember that Israel only has one of the 15 points, while Iran has 4. So in the point by point, Iran is coming out the winner. But we can't ignore that strong Venus. That strong Venus in the Lagna is going to bring some kind of success to Israel. And I'm predicting that the United States is definitely going to come to the aid of Israel, which in its own way is a success and will lead to some kinds of success. Will it win the whole war because of it? According to the Prashna rules, it won't win the entire war, but it will get some sort of, some kinds of victories and successes on its own part. Okay, so the second point, the 8th Lord. So the 8th Lord is the battle itself. The 8th is battles. And so in this chart, the 8th Lord is exalted, which is really good for Israel. The 8th Lord being exalted shows that it's going to have a lot of exalted occurrences for them in terms of the battle. But I talked about earlier, Jupiter is combust with the sun. Jupiter's combust, as you can see right here. If it's combust, it's going to lead to frustrations and disappointments. So Israel is going to be very frustrated and come up with a lot of disappointments in terms of the battles themselves. But there's going to be a lot of optimism. Jupiter is going to give some good results and some important successes. Jupiter is also in the 3rd, the house of effort, the house of applying courage. So there's going to be a lot of valiant courage and efforts given, but the results that they want are not going to be what they end up receiving in the end because Jupiter is combust. So no matter how hard they fight, no matter how courageous they are, it's not going to be enough for them, and there's going to be a frustration, which could mean that they're going to have to take some serious losses. That combust Jupiter is the only flaw on that Jupiter, and it does make a big difference. So that is what I'm seeing with Israel. A very exalted, they're going to be battling very strong. They're going to be very powerful as an army, but it's not going to be enough to them to look at themselves and say, this war was worth it, or we're getting where we want to go. There's going to be disappointment involved at the end of the day. And as we talked about with the 3rd rule, the divisions that we talked about, the divisions being Saturn, Jupiter, Mars versus Mercury, Venus, the Moon. So that's another observation that is going to be playing out. Iran has better military capabilities, even though it doesn't have a nuclear weapon. But the Prashna is showing that they are very strong militarily, and they are very robust. They blew Israel out of the water when we tallied up those points. It was 5 points to 0. So we're going to see that play out. Iran having the upper hand. Iran's 10th Lord. So as we went through these rules, we noticed that the 10th Lord was important. And the 10th is the actions itself. So when the 10th Lord was in the Lagna or in the 7th, it was showing that assistance comes. So actions support one of the sides. So the 10th is an important planet. And if we read the 10th from the side of Iran, if we read it from the 7th, the 10th Lord is the sun, and it's in the 8th. But if we read from the side of Israel, the 10th Lord is Aquarius, and it's in the 12th. It's Saturn, it's in the 12th. So Iran's 10th lord, which is the sun, is in the 8th, but in a friend sign. The 8th is it's the sign of battles. It's a difficult place. It's not a good house to be in. So I'm predicting this is a very difficult up and down war for Iran. It's going to be very difficult with a lot of unexpected events that happen to them. But since the sun is in a friend sign, Mercury sign, those unexpected events will eventually lean in their favor. So hard fighting, difficult fighting, unexpected tragedies, but overall can lean on the positive. So that more or less works in Iran's case. So and we even saw at the beginning of the war how Iran was caught off guard, and a lot of its military generals were killed, and we see they're still being killed. So a lot of surprise attacks that Iran will suffer, and unexpected setbacks. But the 8th is also unexpected boons, so good things that happen unexpectedly. So ups and downs, basically. So Iran is going to this is going to be difficult for Iran, but since the sun is in a friend sign, some things will lean in their favor. It would be much worse if the sun was in bad dignity here. If the sun was in bad dignity, it would be the whole war would be filled with downs, filled with unexpected tragedies. But it's not. So that is a part of a saving grace. But if we look at, this is probably the most key point of the entire prediction and the entire Prashna that I'm seeing, besides going through point by point here. And that is that Israel's 10th lord, the 10th sign from the ascendant, Saturn, is debilitated in the 12th house, the house of losses. This is one of the most crucial positions of the whole chart. And what it shows is that Israel has low resilience. Saturn is the planet of resilience, and Saturn is the planet of the common people. Israel has very low resistance the longer the war goes on, and is going to suffer heavy losses financially and in civilian casualties. So that 10th lord, the lord of the action itself, in the house of loss, debilitated, is a very huge flaw for Israel in this chart. And I think that this is going to cause them to want to end the war as soon as possible once they're starting to realize it, once they start to see the losses start to pile up. They have low resilience in this position. So that 10th lord in the 12th debilitated it bodes very ill for Israel. And as I mentioned, the key timing event is that the sun, the 4th lord, which is the 10th lord from the 7th, so it's the ruler of the actions, is in the connecting yoga, the Ithasala yoga with Mars, the 7th lord. So this is reading from Iran's side. If the 7th was the Lagna, that's Mars. The 10th lord is coming to Mars. So this is a time, we can time this out. When is this event going to happen? When we have a movable Lagna, so if the Lagna was in Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, we count the Prashna in terms of days. If it's a fixed sign, as we have here, we count in terms of months, and if it's a dual sign, we count in terms of weeks. So to find out when this yoga is going to happen, when the sun eventually catches up in degrees to Mars, we can calculate that out. First, what we have to do is calculate how far in degrees they are. So we want to find out how far away they are in terms of minutes, arc minutes. So if we start off and we say, okay, the sun to get to 23 degrees is going to take 46 more arc minutes. So now it's at 23 degrees. To get to 27 degrees, it's going to take another 4 degrees. And each degree is 60 minutes. So 4 times 60 is 240. So 46 plus 240 equals 286. And then, so the sun would be at 27 degrees, but then we'll add another 33 arc minutes to get to exactly 2733. The sun and Mars are 319 arc minutes away from one another. So let's then divide that by, we divide it by 60 to get 5, and we divide it by 60 because we want to see how many degrees, and 1 degree is 60. So in decimal form, they are 5.316 degrees from one another. So since we have a Taurus Lagna, that means we're counting in months. So in 5.316 months, this yoga will take place. And that works out to about the 3rd week of November. So the 3rd week of November, we're going to see this yoga come to fruition. And that could amount to, well, it'll be an event that is the possible support of other countries intervening, because we're talking about this 7th or this 12th rule, the 7th Lord Anithasala with the 4th Lord. It just says victory comes to the enemy, in this case the enemy Iran. So what kind of victory would come, say, at the end of November? Would it be another country, the sun being a sovereign nation, coming to the aid of Iran? That could be a potential. The sun is the planet of governments. But it's just saying that victory is coming to the enemy, or actions that are initiated, important actions that take place at the end of November result in the victory to Iran. And I want to point to another really interesting, the other yoga from the first point here. Agraha in the Lagna Venus, in Isharafa with the moon, indicates the Quiris wins the war. Well, the moon is moving away from Venus, and that would indicate that they win. But why? Well, I interpret this as the moon moving away from the party indicates, because the moon is the planet that makes things happen. As the moon moves around, in the system of astrology, the moon is the planet that puts things in motion. And because it's moving so quickly. So when planets are in yogas with the moon, when they're in connecting yogas with the moon is bringing about the event. Well, the moon is moving away. Why would the moon moving away from them make them win? I believe that's because the plans for the war have been initiated. And when the war starts, and if those two are in separation, that the plan has been put in place much longer before the war actually begins, which gives a better position to win the war. So how far away are these two planets? Well, so Venus needs 9 minutes to get to, and so let's calculate when this yoga took place. They're separating, so the yoga happened in the past, the event happened in the past because they're separating. And if they were connecting, that means the event would happen in the future. So when in the past did this event happen that would have led to Israel winning the war? 7 minutes, to get to 7 degrees, we have to go 9 minutes. And then how long does it take to get to 11 degrees? It's another 4, that's another 4 degrees, which 60 minutes per degree. We add 240, because 4 degrees has 240 arc minutes. And then plus 13. So these two planets are 262 minutes from the exact degrees from one another. 262 minutes of arc minutes from one another. So let's divide that by 60, and we get, because 60 minutes to a degree, they are 4 degrees, 0.36 from one another. And since we're in months, because we have a fixed sign, that means this event took place, Venus and the moon yoga happening at the exact point. This event took place in the past 4.36 months ago. So what happened 4.36 months ago? Let's see. On the 13th of June, if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 0.6, so 0.36. So we could say, what could we say, like a third of a month. So about a week and a half, you could say. We're talking about around January 30th, maybe even that full week. So the week after the inauguration. So what this yoga is saying is that just after the inauguration, the plans for the war were initiated. And that's interesting, because would that have been possible that the war was decided upon at that time? Well, this Prashna is pointing to that the war was decided upon to be activated just after Trump got into office, or some event that led to this war was initiated at that timing. So basically, as a recap, we have the United States coming into the war because we have such a strong diplomatic position of Venus being in its own house, Venus being Iran, the Lagna Lord, giving certain successes for Israel. It's its only point that it wins in the list. So that's going to be a huge turning point in the war. But when we look at all of the other factors, Iran wins out. It has 4 other points: a stronger army, stronger forces in general, the 7th Lord being in an angle, Mars being in the 4th, and the 2 other points, the slow planets behind and gentle planets in front, and then that final yoga here, the 7th Lord in Ithisala with the 4th Lord. So Iran having better, this Prashna is showing us that Iran has better military capabilities, and that Israel, because of Saturn being the 10th Lord, debilitated, and in the 12th sign, heavy losses and low resilience factor on the side of Israel. They're not going to be as resilient as they thought they could be in this war. And as the longer the war goes on, the worse it's going to get for Israel. And again, let's watch for the 3rd week in November for the potential of other countries coming in and intervening in a material way for the help of Iran. And I just want to add here, I'm editing, that it doesn't necessarily have to be other countries coming to the aid of Iran. As I just said, it could be that the actions themselves lead to victory, because the 10th is actions on the part of Iran itself. So it could come in the form of other sovereign nations coming to their aid, but that their actions will come to fruition initiated in November that lead to a victorious outcome. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be another nation that comes in, but their actions will reach a fruition point, a starting point or a fruition point in November that becomes the tides that turn the war in their favor. So I'm going to archive this video. I'm definitely going to be paying attention, but I'm going to be coming back to these predictions and seeing if they come to fruition, if it actually happens in this way. But the Prashna is telling us that Iran is a clear victor, and I just went through and we gave a little bit more details to read this chart and see what else we can glean from it. Okay, so thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'd like to know what you think. And yeah, I'll be remembering these, I'll be saving these predictions, and we'll see what happens. Only time will tell what is really going to happen in this war between Israel and Iran. Okay, thank you for watching.